I just want to watch this video real quick, just on Call of Duty. It's like all the endings, kind of. Go back and like look at all of them. So yeah, here we go.
I got you, brother.
You had me worried, man. For a while there, I thought you were gonna let that bastard live.
Over here!
Later, section.
Do not enter. I swear to God, I will shove this wheelchair right up your
ass. Hey, Woods. You look like hammered shit.
You stay right there. Mason, I shot you.
Turns out you're a lousy shot.
My ass. Where the fuck you been for 30 years?
They both still sound the same. When they sound a little bit
is
different.
triggered to play
like
upon my
older.
assassination. Cordesquier, you know how to proceed. My death will shine light upon ubiquitous darkness.
David Mason for Sergeant Woods.
Another Mason?
Oh, fuck. Secure the building.
Hey, kid.
Jesus,
Come on.
Frank.
Introduce you to somebody.
I'm guessing this is like the canon in
Al, this is Dave. Dave,
How you doing?
this is your dad.
canon, good, bad, alternate. It's almost canon.
Dad.
Fucking broads, work this shit out on your own.
What's the next ending?
U.S. cellular prepaid plans are built to have your back.
What's that? Oh, the reporters died. I got. Yeah, I got the good end.
On your own.
Yeah. Put your gut back up.
I remember that part. I don't think I was listening for that part.
I will see you. Ready? Nice.
Yeah.
Where the fuck?
Fucking worm, mate. Same twat that copped the drones. Best thing I...
The show tonight.
Secure him.
What happened to the lights? The fuck?
Mi hermana Josefina.
Oh, Mason. So he didn't kill Mason?
Yeah. Been waiting for this.
She survived the fire. For me. I didn't leave her. You took her from me.
What'd you learn from that?
What did I learn?
I got this ending too. With Mason living, wouldn't he killed him? I didn't get this ending. Okay.
Welcome back to Comic Story and Gaming, where we do a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. We sit around and have... Today, we decided, why not tell you the good story in Call of Duty Black Ops, and not include Black Ops 3, because overall, Black Ops 1 and 2 and World at War are the good storylines. You see, it all begins in World War II with the game World at War. While Private Miller and Corporal Roebuck are fighting their way across the Pacific Theater with the US Marines, the Red Army is fighting against the Nazis in Stalingrad. There, the Red Army Private Dmitry Petrenko meets Sergeant Viktor Reznov. Working alongside the Red Army, the two soldiers help push the Nazis out of Stalingrad, and they fight their way to Berlin. Eventually, the war ends, and both the Japanese and the Nazi regime are defeated, bringing the end of the World at War game. But then that brings us to Black Ops 1. Flash forward to 1968. CIA agent Alex Mason finds himself strapped to a chair. A mysterious voice begins to question him, demanding answers about his actions, about the numbers. Mason's memories begin to get fuzzy, but his mind flashes back to 1961, to one of his previous missions. During the Bay of Pigs, Mason was a part of the team sent to assassinate Fidel Castro. Unfortunately, the team screws up and kills one of Castro's body doubles. During the escape, Mason is captured and handed off to the Russian general Nikita Dragovich and sent away to the Vorkuta Gulag. During his time at the Gulag, Mason meets and befriends former soldier Viktor Reznov. The two men orchestrate an uprising among the prisoners, and they manage to escape the Gulag. And then 1 month later, Mason is returned to the US and is brought to the Pentagon. Mason has a new handler, Jason Hudson, and the two men are given the task of assassinating Dragovich. Working alongside Frank Woods and Joseph Bowman, Mason is sent to Russia to destroy their space program and assassinate the general. While the launch is stopped, Dragovich manages to escape. Vowing revenge, Mason spends 5 years hunting Dragovich down. The SOG team is deployed to Vietnam during 1968, where they fight against the Communist Russia's involvement in the war. During the Tet Offensive, Mason manages to recover the information about a Russian defector, and that defector is Viktor Reznov. Meanwhile, Hudson finds himself in Hong Kong, working to find a doctor that is working for Dragovich. However, before he can finish his interrogation, the doctor is killed and Hudson must flee from Dragovich's men. But, still strapped to a chair, Mason is telling his story, and he tells them about Dragovich from Reznov's perspective after World War II. You see, Dragovich's unit discovered a Nazi chemical weapon known as Nova 6. Dragovich wished to test that weapon alongside his friend Lev Kachenko and Dr. Steiner. And Dr. Steiner decided to test it on his own soldiers. In the Gulag, Reznov makes Mason promise that he will avenge the death of his friends if Reznov doesn't escape. Mason continues his story with his unit in Vietnam then. You see, in Vietnam, after investigating a Russian spy plane and discovering canisters in Nova 6, the SOG team is actually captured by the Viet Cong. Meanwhile, Hudson is sent in with a team to a Russian base in the Ural Mountains. Though the base turns out to be a trap, Hudson is contacted by Dr. Steiner, who asks to be taken in by the Americans before Dragovich has a chance to tie up loose ends. Woods and Mason manage to escape, with Mason meeting up with Reznov. The two men manage to steal a Russian hind, and they fight their way to a base with the mission of killing Kravchenko. However, the Russian takes his own life with a belt of grenades. Mason and Reznov manage to find the intel that leads them to Rebirth Island, a secret Russian base where they test biological weapons. Hudson leads an assault team against the facility while Mason manages to sneak inside with Reznov. Mason manages to get to Steiner first and watches as Reznov executes the doctor. However, Hudson is watching the scene from behind a window. Mason is alone, ranting about how he and Reznov will have his revenge. Still strapped to a chair in the interrogation room, Mason is shocked to discover that his captor is Hudson. The agent is trying desperately to break Mason's brainwashing. He reveals to Mason that he was reconditioned to be a Russian sleeper agent while captured in the Gulag. But Reznov reconditioned the reconditioning, using Mason as a tool for his revenge against Dragovich. The real Reznov was actually killed during the escape, and Mason has been fighting on his own this whole time. Mason is finally freed of his brainwashing and he realizes where the numbers being broadcast are coming from. He leads the CIA to an underwater broadcast station, and the broadcast is stopped, and Dragovich is finally killed. Now we go to Black Ops 2. Jump forward to 2025. David Mason and Mark Harper are visiting an aging Frank Woods in a special operations retirement home. They begin to question him about the location of Raul Mendez. Frank tells them that Mendez recently visited him and begins to tell them about the past. In 1986, Alex Mason was living in Alaska with his son David. But Alex was asked to come out of semi-retirement by Jason Hudson for a special mission. Woods had gone missing with his team and had been disavowed by the CIA in Cubango. Mason and Hudson manage to rescue Woods and locate Mendez in the jungle. Unfortunately, the man manages to escape, and Woods reveals that Mendez is the one who murdered the team. After learning this, Mason and Hudson begin to hunt down Mendez, who has established himself as an arms dealer, selling weapons to the highest bidder in South America and Latin America. He continues to evade capture and begins to sell arms across the Russian-controlled Afghanistan. It seems that Mendez has a personal vendetta against the West. It is revealed that his sister was injured during a fire that was started by an American businessman for insurance. To add to this, Mendez's father, a powerful drug lord, was also killed by a CIA team. Mason, Hudson, and Woods lead a team against Mendez's home in Nicaragua, where Woods accidentally kills Mendez's sister with a grenade. Mendez then begins to escape and begin a personal war against those that he believes have wronged him. During the invasion of Panama in 1989, Mendez kidnapped Hudson and David Mason, using them to set up a trap for Mason and Woods. He tricked Woods into shooting Mason, killing Hudson, and crippling Woods. But he lets Woods and David live, promising to return and finish the job when the time is right. 3 decades have passed, and Mendez has become the head of Cordis Die. He has started a new Cold War between China and the US, and he is trying to start a large-scale war between the two by staging attacks against both of them. David Mason, now a Navy SEAL commander, leads his team on a search for Mendez under the JSOC command. Mason leads his team to Myanmar, where they discover that Mendez has a machine that allows him to hack any computer device. They head to Pakistan, where they learn that Mendez has a target known as Karma in the Cayman Islands. And heading there, they learn that Karma is actually Chloe Lynch, who worked on the hacking device for Mendez in one of his shell organizations, and is marked for execution to tie up loose ends. Mason's team continues to hunt Mendez down, eventually recapturing him in Yemen. But Mendez meant to be captured, and uses this as an opportunity to be brought aboard the USS Obama and gain access to the US drone fleet. Mendez uses drones to attack the G20 summit in Los Angeles, and Mason's team is deployed to secure the president. JSOC manages to learn the location of Mendez's hacking signal and deploys Mason's team to Haiti. There, they fight against the villain's forces, stopping the signal, capturing Mendez once and for all. With this done, Mendez's involvement in sparking the war is brought to light, and China and the US enter into an alliance with one another. It's revealed that Alex Mason survived the shot that Woods took against him, and he visits his old friend in retirement. Mendez is locked away, forced to watch as the world comes together despite his efforts. And that is the ending of Black Ops 2. Now, Black Ops 3 does exist, but its story's kind of disconnected from everything else. It travels into the future. It gets a little weird. But it looks like we're getting a reboot with Black Ops 4. I personally haven't done the storyline yet, but I'm going to be very soon. Everything came out in November. I got a lot of games to play, guys. I know you do. But what did you think about the crazy and confusing storyline of Black Ops 1 and 2? Do you like them? Do you hate them? Personally, that and Modern Warfare, they're my favorite storylines in Call of Duty. And since there's like 16 games, there's plenty to gauge it against. We have Advanced Warfare, we have Infinite Warfare. What was the one that had Kevin Spacey in it? Does anyone even remember that one? I think it was Advanced Warfare. I don't know. I liked that one's multiplayer. That was fun. Either way, guys, let us know in the comments down below which story.
It's a complete summary.
Mellow open again. Oh, that's right. I heard he's starring in the next superhero blockbuster. They're calling him Mellow Man.
Find it. Try it.
The scientist hands us his butt plug and tells us to use his plan to clog up a series of tubes. So we shoot Micro Rooker and meet up with Candyman, whom we give the butt plug.
What?
Recently, I played through Call of Duty Black Ops 2 with the help of some friends to keep me from going insane from troubleshooting. We'll get to that. The following is a completely accurate summary of the campaign. Trust me. The game begins with the US military invading a high-security old folks' home, where it's revealed that 100 Acre survived getting exploded in the first game through the power of because the plot says so. 100 Acre tells Caesarion that he was visited by Dees, and Caesarion is a flashback about fuck you being just the world's best dad, where he tells a 7-year-old boy to stop being a baby. Windows 65 shows up to re-recruit fuck you to do off-the-book stuff because Call of Duty wants you to know that the good guys are allowed to break the law if it's for good reasons, like because the CIA wants you to. And we cut to Angola, where we kill an arbitrary amount of enemies until our Uber shows up, which immediately gets shot down because it's a helicopter in a Call of Duty game, so it's contractually obligated to do so. How many times have I reused this joke already? Whatever, if Call of Duty is allowed to repeatedly do the same thing, so am I. Also, we gave the Uber 2 stars. We find 100 Acre, who's been cosplaying a pepperoni pizza, and go through a 2010s action game mandatory helicopter boss fight before doing...
Alright, this is more of like a roast. Oh man.
Shaw is able to escape and alert a rescue team to their location for extraction. Months later, Shaw is sent to Vietnam to search for information. He's back to the compound to find his sister.
Okay, so this is both stories. Cool. What?
With Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War right around the corner, we here at Suggestive Gaming figured now would be a great time to catch up on the storyline of the Black Ops saga thus far. As you may know, I covered the Black Ops series in a video already, but that video had some issues and left out some things, so let's do a more definitive version. Note that I won't be covering all the Black Ops media, namely a couple short stories and comics, mostly because I find them fairly redundant. Now, without further ado, this is what you need to know about Call of Duty Black Ops. But first, we have to take a little trip back. In 1942, during the Second World War, we find American Private Miller on the Makin Island of Japan, captured by the Japanese army. He is forced to watch his team be tortured and executed before being saved in the last moment by a squad of Marines, led by Corporal Roebuck and Sergeant Sullivan. The group lead an assault on the Peleliu beach, and Miller destroys the Japanese tanks there, allowing the American artillery to advance. However, shortly after, Sullivan is killed by a katana-wielding Japanese officer who is promptly killed by Miller. Sullivan's death triggers Roebuck's promotion to sergeant, and he and his squad take out a Japanese airfield. Meanwhile, the Battle of Stalingrad is raging on between the Russian and German forces on the Eastern Front. Russian Private Dmitry Petrenko awakens in a bloody fountain to witness his comrades being executed by German soldiers. Feigning death, he is able to wait until the German men leave, and he meets another Russian survivor, Sergeant Viktor Reznov. Reznov explains to Dmitry that his mission is to eliminate German General Heinrich Amsel, the man commanding the unit behind the current massacres. The two men fight their way back to what remains of Dmitry's unit, and they lead an assault on Amsel's communication post, overtaking it and killing the general in the process. 3 years later, during the Battle of Seelow Heights near Berlin, Dmitri has been captured by German soldiers and is being kept in an abandoned house. He is saved by an attacking Soviet unit and is reunited with Reznov, who introduces him to Private Chernov, his right-hand man. They then fight their way to a German camp, wiping it out in turn. During this time, Miller and the American armed forces are able to penetrate and take control of Palileu. In Germany, Dmitri and Reznov make their way to Berlin to engage with German soldiers. After fighting over several days, they are able to make their way to the German U-Bahn metro station and are forced to retreat inside to avoid an artillery bombing. Once inside, a surge of water enters the tunnel, which Dmitri is unable to avoid. In the Pacific, Miller's squad make a ground assault on Okinawa, eventually fighting their way into Shuri Castle. There, the squad find Japanese soldiers surrendering, but they are revealed to have been concealing live grenades under their armor, which go off, killing Roebuck or Private Polanski, depending on Miller's reaction. Japanese soldiers lead a battle inside the castle center until Miller calls in an airstrike, allowing the Americans to take Shuri Castle and effectively claim victory in the Pacific War. Meanwhile, Reznov is able to drag Dmitri, who narrowly avoided drowning, out of the U-Bahn, and they regroup with the Soviet army. They fight their way to the Reichstag, a German parliament building in Berlin. At the entrance, Chernov is burned with a flamethrower and later dies of his wounds. Reznov and Dmitri fight their way onto the rooftop of the building, where the Soviets clear their way to the Nazi flag atop it. Dmitri brings down the flag and begins to plant a Soviet one in its place. He is then shot by a wounded German soldier, whom Reznov kills with a machete. Fighting through his wounds, Dmitri makes his way to the flagpole and plants the Soviet flag, signaling victory and the end of the war in Europe. Some 20 years later, during the Cold War in 1968, SOG and CIA operative Alex Mason is being held captive in an unknown location, being interrogated by an unknown person about a number station being used to contact Soviet sleeper agents in the US. Mason recounts his past experiences, starting with a failed mission to assassinate Fidel Castro in 1961 during the Bay of Pigs invasion. Mason is captured by Castro's soldiers and is presented to Nikita Dragovich, Major General of the Soviet Army. Dragovich sends Mason to the Vorkuta Gulag, a Russian labor camp where he is held for 2 years. Inside Vorkuta, Mason meets and befriends Viktor Reznov, who was captured and imprisoned following Operation Olympus, in which Reznov and Dmitry Petrenko, under the orders of Dragovich and Colonel Lev Kravchenko, were sent to the Arctic Circle to capture a Nazi scientist, Friedrich Steiner, to prevent him from unleashing a nerve toxin called Nova 6. The group find and secure Nova 6, however Dragovich orders his soldiers to restrain Reznov so he could see the effects of Nova 6 for himself. He proceeds to gas his own men, and Reznov witnesses the horrible death of his friend Dmitri. Reznov is able to break free and lead a small group of his own soldiers to escape and sink the ship holding the weapon, hoping to prevent its use in the future. However, he is not able to escape for good and is later captured and sent to the prison. Victor tells his story to Mason and asks him to promise him to avenge Dmitri's death by killing Dragovich and his allies Kravchenko and Steiner. Reznov and Mason spark an uprising amongst the prisoners, and in the chaos, the two are able to escape captivity. Afterwards, Mason is escorted to the Pentagon with his handler Jason Hudson, where he is given a mission by President John F. Kennedy to assassinate Dragovich. He is then sent with Master Sergeant Frank Woods and Chief Petty Officer Joseph Bowman to sabotage a Soviet space launch which Dragovich will be present at. They are able to destroy the rocket, but Dragovich escapes, leading to a 5-year manhunt by Mason. By this time, the SOG are deployed to Vietnam to investigate Soviet presence. Mason is then tasked with obtaining a dossier with information on Dragovich from an unknown defector, who to Mason's surprise turns out to be Reznov. Later, Mason and the SOG fight their way through Viet Cong-controlled territory in an attempt to chase Kravchenko, but they are then sent to find and investigate a downed Soviet plane carrying Nova 6. However, the team of Mason, Woods, and Bowman are captured by the Viet Cong. Meanwhile, Agent Hudson is sent on a mission to infiltrate a Soviet base believed to be the center of development for Nova 6. There, he and his team find a trap set by Dragovich, but are contacted by the Nazi scientist Dr. Steiner, who reveals his location and information on cracking the numbers broadcast in exchange for his safety from Dragovich. Mason, Woods, and Bowman, meanwhile, are held in captivity and forced to play Russian roulette. After refusing, Bowman is murdered by their captors with a metal pipe. Woods and Mason then quickly hatch and execute a plan to kill their captors and escape. The two then steal a Russian Hind helicopter and fly to Kravchenko's base. There, Mason once again comes across Reznov, who leads him to Kravchenko. Once Mason locates him, however, Kravchenko is able to ambush him and knock him out. Woods arrives quickly thereafter and is able to stab Kravchenko, who then pulls the pin on his grenade in a last-ditch attempt to kill Woods and Mason along with himself. Woods is able to tackle him out of the window, however, and they both fall, seemingly exploding on the way down. Mason and Reznov then find documents that lead them to Dr. Steiner's current location, Rebirth Island, and the two set off. There, Mason finds Hudson, and the two fight their way through the Nova 6 research facility to finally reach Dr. Steiner. Hudson leads an assault on the facility while Mason sneaks in with Reznov. Mason and Reznov reach Steiner before Hudson does, and Reznov murders him. While this is how Mason remembers the events, his interrogator reveals himself to in fact be Hudson, who witnessed Steiner's death not at the hands of Reznov, but of Mason himself, who was alone in the room with the scientist. It is then revealed that during his stay at Vorkuta, Mason was subjected to an intense form of torture and mental reconditioning in an attempt to turn him into a sleeper agent to perform acts for the Soviet army inside of America. However, Reznov was able to interfere with the conditioning and instead use it to brainwash Mason into a devotion to kill Dragovich, Kravchenko, and Steiner to avenge Dmitri's death. Shortly thereafter, during their escape from the prison, Reznov was killed, with all of his further appearances to Mason being a figment of his imagination. Finally broken from this brainwashing, Mason is able to recall the origin of the numbers broadcast, a ship called the Rusalka. The CIA invade the ship as well as the underwater broadcast station it is anchored to. There, Mason finally kills Dragovich and destroys the broadcast station, stopping the threat of any sleeper agents being awoken in the United States.
Mobile games are going big. Clash of Clans.
Around this time, Sergeant Michael Shaw is captured along with Mason in Cuba, but Shaw is able to escape and alert a rescue team to their location for extraction. Months later, Shaw is sent to Vietnam to search for information on a biological weapon developed by the Soviets. There he is assisted by a Soviet defector, Sergeant Yuri Razlov, and the group drop napalm on a weapons cache and steal an experimental fighter jet intended to deliver the biological weapon. Afterwards, the US forces destroy a factory used to develop this weapon, as well as a submarine intended to deliver it, stopping the Soviet Union's ability to use said weapon, which could be Nova 6, at least for the time being. In the mid to late 1970s, Hudson learns of an attempt by the KGB to revive Project Nova, and Woods leads a squad to investigate. He finds and kills Steiner's protege, Schlussel, and finds intel leading to a missile launch site where the KGB planned to add a Nova 6 dispersal device to a ballistic missile. Woods is able to prevent this launch and proceeds to destroy the facility. By 1986, Mason had left active duty to live in Alaska with his 7-year-old son David, whose mother had died. Hudson arrives to recruit Mason to help deal with the Angolan Civil War after Woods and his squad disappeared trying to help the Angolan rebels and their leader Jonas Savimbi. Mason agrees, and he and Hudson set out to recover Woods in the Cuando Cubango, where he was captured after his men were killed by Nicaraguan arms dealer Raul Menendez. While attempting to radio for an extraction, Mason encounters Menendez, and in the following confrontation, Menendez pulls a grenade, but Mason is able to shoot Menendez in the face and jump free from the hut before it explodes. Savimbi then arrives in a helicopter to help them escape. Mason and Hudson then begin to track Menendez, who survived the blast and established himself even further as a primary arms dealer for conflicts all around the world, including selling weapons to Lev Kravchenko, who survived the blast in Vietnam but is later executed by Mason, Hudson, and Woods after an interrogation revealing that Menendez had moles in the CIA. Menendez holds a grudge after an American injured his sister Josefina in an insurance scheme, burning her nearly to death, and his father was assassinated by the CIA, charging his one-man assault on the West. The CIA authorized a strike against Menendez's base of operations, and Mason, Woods, and Hudson are sent in. Local security forces storm Raul's compound, and upon seeing a guard hurting his sister, an enraged Menendez stabs him to death, but is wrestled to the ground and sedated by the others. Awakening outside, Menendez is freed by General Manuel Noriega, whom he paid off previously to protect him from American capture. He attacks Noriega and runs back to the compound to find his sister. He reaches her room but is held back by Hudson. Woods, becoming enraged by seeing his captor again, tosses a grenade at it. The grenade misses, however, and enters Josefina's room, exploding and killing her. Menendez survives this blast, but with the help of Noriega, fakes his death in order to work from the shadows to get vengeance for his sister's death. He finally makes his move in Panama during Operation Just Cause. Hudson, Woods, and Mason intend on capturing Noriega, but it turns out Menendez was only using Noriega as bait. He kidnaps Mason's son David, then captures Hudson and Mason. Using David's life as a bargaining chip, Menendez forces Hudson to call Woods and tell him to shoot a captured man with a bag over his head, as it is Raul Menendez. Woods complies and afterwards runs down to discover the man he shot was actually Alex Mason. Menendez then shoots Woods in both legs, crippling him. He takes Woods to where he is holding Hudson and a drugged David. Menendez then asks Hudson which life he should take next, and Hudson sacrifices himself. After Menendez kills Hudson with his sister's pendant, he leaves Woods to suffer with the guilt of killing his friends. David wakes up, and Woods takes him in, raising him under the lie that his father was simply killed by a drifter. After spending decades in the shadows, Menendez reemerges in 2014 as the leader of a social media populist movement called Cortes Die, By 2025, Cordes DA had amassed a following of over 2 billion followers, which triggers the US to recognize Menendez as a national terrorist threat once more. Using his investments in weapon technology over the decades, Menendez is able to hire engineer Chloe Lynch to develop a new rare earth element called Solarium, which houses more processing power than the entire US military. He then hires a magnetometrist, Eric Brainer, to process it into a smaller form, which is placed in a chip that Menendez stores in his fake eye. Using Solarium, Menendez hacks the Chinese stock market and crashes it, sending them into a depression. Menendez manipulates the media to believe the attack was ordered by the White House, triggering a Cold War between China's Strategic Defense Coalition and the US-led NATO. Menendez uses the political turmoil to incite conflicts and attempt to bring about a war between the two superpowers. This leads the US to send in David Mason, now a Navy SEAL commander codenamed Section, and his team called JSOC to search for Menendez once more. The JSOC gather intel from Woods and eventually follow Menendez's tracks to find Brainer, who tells them about something codenamed Karma, and is shortly thereafter killed. The team find out Karma is actually Chloe Lynch, who Menendez is trying to eliminate to tie up loose ends. Depending on the player's actions throughout the rest of the game, several drastically different outcomes can take place, including Chloe living or dying to prevent Menendez's future cyber attack, as well as actually killing or apprehending Menendez himself. In the best ending, Chloe survives, and the story culminates with Menendez's capture and imprisonment on the USS Obama. There he is interrogated, but an attack by Cordes DA allows him to break free. Menendez uploads the virus stored in his eye into the US mainframe and escapes in a jet. Menendez takes refuge in a base in Haiti to take control of the US's drone army. The US launch an attack on the base, but Menendez kills a Marine and takes his uniform to disguise himself. He then broadcasts a message revealing that his plan was to actually destroy the drones to cripple the US military and allow Cordes DA's billions of followers to rise up and attack the government. During his escape, however, David is able to stop Menendez and capture him, imprisoning him for life. Later, Woods is met by an unknown visitor, who reveals himself to be Mason, having survived Woods shooting him 30 years prior. The two then catch up on Mason's time hiding out, before David arrives and is finally introduced to his father. Meanwhile, Menendez watches Chloe being interviewed by Jimmy Kimmel, and as she curses him, he bashes his face against the television. 20 years later, we find Savannah Mason Meyer,
Black Ops 4? I didn't know they had a campaign mode. Well, I haven't played that one yet, so I have to kind of cut it off here. I'll finish it when I finish that game. Yes. All right.